Hey everyone, what if you came back from a space mission and found out something came back with you? What would you do? Today we're recapping the sci-fi thriller Sputnik, where a crew member is found alive after a spacecraft crash landing, but the cosmonaut is suffering from constant memory loss. After being rescued, he's locked up and isolated in a government facility surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. A psychologist is brought in to figure out the cause of his amnesia, and in the process, she stumbles onto a mystery far bigger than anyone expected. During the Cold War in 1983, two Russian cosmonauts, Commander Konstantin Veshnyakov and Lieutenant Kirill Averchenko, completed the final stage of the Orbit 4 space mission. Kirill talks about how excited he is to see his family as they prepare for atmospheric re-entry back to Earth. After running through all the necessary system checks, the two men are finally ready to make their descent. As they start entering Earth's atmosphere, severe turbulence kicks in, and the spacecraft starts shaking violently. They suspect a hull breach. Both men try to stay calm despite their nerves. The turbulence doesn't last long, but they notice something moving outside the spacecraft, and it freaks them out. The capsule crashes down in the fields of Kazakhstan in a rough emergency landing. Unfortunately, only Konstantin survives. Meanwhile, at a brain research institute in Moscow, Dr. Tatyana Yurievna, a psychiatrist and renowned neurophysiologist, is on trial for alleged medical negligence. She explains that her patient was misdiagnosed by the previous doctor, and insists that her method of submerging the patient in water is necessary to temporarily cut off the oxygen supply to the lungs. In the end, she's punished and fired from her position. Meanwhile, Colonel Semiradov, the Chief Secretary of Scientific Research for the Soviet Union, has been watching her case from a distance. Impressed by her no-nonsense attitude, he approaches Tatyana with a proposal. Semiradov tells her he runs a neuropsychiatry research institute. He convinces her that he'll take care of the review board if she comes with him to Kazakhstan to work on a case. Tatyana doesn't hesitate and hops on a helicopter with Semiradov heading to Kazakhstan. On board, Semiradov reveals how they had to falsify the media reports about the recent Orbit 4 landing. He goes on to explain that they lost radio contact with the cosmonauts the day before the landing. The patient, Konstantin, was the only survivor. He was recovered near the wreckage of the spacecraft and has been suffering from constant memory lapses ever since. They soon arrive at the All-Union Scientific Research Institute. As they head toward one of the underground labs, Semiradov tells the doctor she'll have access to 90% of the facility. They find Dr. Jan Rigel, the institute's research director, trying some kind of hypnosis on Konstantin to get him to remember what happened before the spacecraft crashed. But Konstantin just mocks him to his face, and Rigel ends the session feeling disappointed and frustrated. While Rigel vents his frustration, Tatyana walks into the interrogation room to talk to Konstantin. She introduces herself and offers him a cup of tea. As soon as he picks up the cup, Tatyana carefully observes his every movement. She explains that she's been asked to evaluate his mental state. She puts on an indifferent expression and suddenly asks about his toy. Konstantin explains that it's a cosmonaut tradition to bring a personal possession with them into space. After a few minutes of conversation and questions, Konstantin asks Tatyana to help him contact his mother and let her know he's alive. Tatyana neither agrees nor refuses and says goodbye. On the other side of the glass confinement, she tells the team that the patient is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and explains that his sensory receptors may have been damaged. She voices her disapproval of keeping Konstantin confined and says he should be treated as a patient, not a prisoner. After making her assessment, Tatyana tells Semiradov she's done and now intends to leave. Tatyana's booked on a flight back to Moscow the next morning, so with no other choice, she is forced to spend the night at the facility. After settling into her room, she tries to fulfill Konstantin's request by calling his mother, but the operator blocks the call. Later that night, Semiradov knocks on her door and takes her back to the lab. A group of soldiers suddenly arrives and activates multiple locks on the room where Konstantin is confined. From outside, watching on the monitors, they observe as Konstantin vomits blood onto the floor. Moments later, an embryo of a non-terrestrial creature crawls out of his mouth. Seeing the creature come to life, the doctor is completely shocked and paralyzed with terror. She tries to calm herself down, but she's shaking badly. Semiradov explains that the creature resides inside Konstantin. It emerges from its host during the night. Although it might look like Konstantin is in pain, the creature leaves and re-enters his body without actually hurting him. Tatyana is suspicious and demands to know why they want her working on this classified case. Semiradov then admits he chose her specifically because of her radical approach to medicine, willing to go against protocol in order to get results. Tatyana accepts the case and immediately starts listing the equipment and materials she'll need. Tatiana discovers more about the creature's nature while reviewing the results of previous experiments where they tried to separate it from its host. Without the creature, Konstantin's vital signs progressively deteriorate, but with it, he gains incredible vitality and exceptional healing abilities. The creature incubates between the esophagus and the stomach. Every time it wants to leave its host, it releases a toxin that relaxes the muscles, knocking Konstantin unconscious before venturing out. Its ability to survive outside the body seems to be increasing, now lasting up to nearly 2 hours each time it emerges. Tatiana's trying to figure out whether the creature is a parasite or some other form of life entirely. While she's reviewing footage of the creature, Dr. Rigel walks in. She asks him how the creature feeds. Rigel is blunt and dismissive, explaining that it gets its nutrients from whatever food Konstantin ingests. Tatiana picks up on his hostility and assures him she's not there to steal his spot on the case. She then tries to reach Konstantin's son, who's been placed in an orphanage somewhere. Later, she schedules a session with Konstantin and finds him working out in his cell. She makes up a story telling him he might have killed his crewmate during atmospheric re-entry, and that's the reason he's being held in the cell. She gets in his face, saying she doesn't see him as some national hero, not even close, and finishes by asking why he abandoned his son after his wife died. Konstantin doesn't respond and says the session is over. When she walks out, the team is furious with Tatiana for making up that whole story, but she quickly explains it was just a test. She deliberately provoked him to measure his endocrine levels and increase his psychological stress in order to determine with precision how the creature reacts to hormonal changes. Then she asks Semiradov to transfer Konstantin to a medical unit during the day and allow him to interact with other people, attempting to recreate normal living conditions so she can get a more realistic clinical approach. The next day, Tatiana visits Konstantin in his new medical unit. She apologizes for intentionally provoking him just to measure his hormone levels under heavy stress. Konstantin sits in silence with his back to her. Just as Tatiana is about to leave, he suddenly says he didn't know about the child. A week before his flight, he was informed about the death of his fiancée. She had no living relatives, so his son was taken to an orphanage without his knowledge. The government deliberately hid this information to prevent him from making any decisions before his space mission. Then he tells the doctor he suspects she's not really there to treat his supposed amnesia, but for something much bigger. Tatiana goes quiet for a moment and says she's not authorized to reveal anything. That night, Tatiana stands behind the glass wall of Konstantin's confinement room. He's unconscious while the creature roams around the room. Suddenly, the thing walks toward her and seems to mimic her movements from the other side of the glass. When Tatiana accidentally bumps into the toy that Konstantin always keeps with him, the creature appears fascinated as it watches the toy spinning on the ground. Tatiana puts on a protective suit and demands to enter the room where the creature is. She places the toy near the creature, and the thing seems entertained, grabbing onto it. While the creature is playing with the toy, she slowly tries to touch it, but suddenly slips on the blood on the floor, causing the creature to react violently. Semiradov immobilizes the creature by turning on blinding lights. He immediately reactivates the glass wall, and the soldiers pull Tatiana to safety. Right after the incident, Semiradov checks if Tatiana is okay. Excited by her new discovery, she tells him how Konstantin's subconscious self is embedded in the creature's mind, based on how it reacted to the toy. She says it's possible the creature responded that way because it remembers the guilt Konstantin feels about his son, and that somehow the host and the creature share a mind. She concludes that the creature partially shares Konstantin's memories and social instincts, which is what's causing his amnesia. She adds that at some point, the creature won't need its host anymore. She suggests taking Konstantin to Moscow for proper treatment, but the colonel immediately shuts her down. Semiradov explains that he's been filing false reports every day to protect his comrade, and to avoid getting orders from the higher-ups to destroy the creature, which would probably mean killing Konstantin too. Tatiana reviews the footage once more and notices that some parts of it have been edited. She confronts Rigel about her suspicion that the creature might not actually be feeding off what Konstantin eats, but is feeding in some other way that he's not telling her about. She says that to run a solid investigation, she needs the right to know everything. Rigel reacts rudely and tells her as a piece of advice to go back to Moscow and forget everything she's seen, telling Rigel that if he's hoping for a Nobel Prize, he's going to need her, and that Semiradov doesn't need to know all the details, but she does. Later that night, Rigel takes Tatiana to witness one of the creature's feeding sessions. Hiding in the back of Rigel's truck, the doctor uses night vision binoculars to observe what's happening inside a warehouse that has a large cage where the soldiers have locked up a prisoner. Because of the creature's sensitivity to light, the feeding is done with all the lights off in complete darkness. The creature enters the cage, goes straight for the prisoner, attacks him, and feeds on him. The next morning, Tatiana invites Konstantin for a jog around the facility's compound. While they run, Tatiana secretly tells him about the alien creature from space that's living inside his body. She goes on to share her recent discovery about how the creature actually feeds. She explains that she can help him separate the creature from himself, but to do that, they need someone who can report his condition to the government. Konstantin doesn't seem all that surprised or scared and asks her a few questions, like whether she's being watched or anything like that. Then he tells her to meet him at midnight in the hallway near the lab. At exactly midnight, Konstantin and Tatiana meet near the laboratory. They sneak through the corridors, heading toward the facility's morgue. Konstantin confesses that he is the creature, a version of himself without morals or obligations. He admits he feels everything and understands everything in the smallest details while in creature form. She asks why he pretended not to know, if he'd already figured out what was happening from the very beginning. He explains that if Semiradov ever finds out he can control the creature, he'll be kept in custody for even longer. His plan is to endure everything for 2 weeks until Semiradov runs out of options and is forced to release him by order of the council. Tatiana doesn't agree with his plan, saying the creature is a danger to everyone around them, and things get tense between them. When she returns to her room, one of the soldiers tells her to go see Semiradov immediately. She confronts him about feeding the creature with actual people. He admits that the real reason they're all here is to find a way to control the creature, turning it into an effective weapon. He then takes her to the feeding chamber and locks her inside the cage along with 2 other prisoners. Suddenly, the creature darts toward one of the terrified prisoners, but Tatiana steps right in front of it, shielding the man behind her. The creature shows hostility but is held back by Tatiana's sheer determination to protect the man. Witnessing this, Semiradov tells the doctor to cooperate with him in figuring out how to fully control the creature, while threatening her life if she refuses. Tatiana is forced to keep working the next day. She decides to study Averchenko's catatonic body together with Rigel, hoping to uncover the truth behind the creature's decision to choose Konstantin over him. She discovers that Averchenko has early-stage cancer that they couldn't detect before the launch. It started with a kidney tumor that eventually causes Addison's disease, a rare adrenal insufficiency disorder that prevents the body from producing high concentrations of metabolic hormones, including cortisol. The creature was able to detect Averchenko's condition, which is why it chose Konstantin as his host instead. When she calls Rigel over to examine Averchenko's body, she hides her real message using medical jargon, telling him that at 2 p.m. by the medical unit, they're going to attempt an escape along with Konstantin. Using the same coded language, Rigel initially refuses to go along with their plan. Continuing the conversation in the same language, Tatiana manages to convince Rigel. He provides her with a bag containing a sedative. Without wasting any time, Tatiana approaches the guard and quickly injects the sedative into his neck, knocking him out cold. She grabs the soldier's weapon, hands it to Rigel, and asks him to stand watch while she goes into Konstantin's room. Tatiana finds him crying on the floor, feeling sorry for himself. Despite his state, she tells him about her escape plan and tries to convince him to go through with it. As they leave the room, Rigel hands Tatiana the keys to his vehicle. Rigel chooses to stay behind, saying there's something he needs to do to make things right. They say their goodbyes. Rigel runs to his office and barricades the doors with a desk. He picks up the phone and calls the authorities, reporting everything about the incident. Meanwhile, in the surveillance room, Semiradov sees Tatiana and Konstantin making their escape. He sends every soldier after them and gives the order to keep Konstantin alive, but kill Tatiana on sight. The two get cornered near the exit, and the soldiers order them to surrender. Just as Tatiana starts raising her hands, the soldiers immediately open fire on her. She takes a bullet straight to the stomach and quickly ducks behind a wall for cover. Meanwhile, Semiradov manages to break into Rigel's office, but Rigel has already leaked all the information about the secret operation to the authorities. Rigel desperately tells Semiradov that he's already reported all of their illegal activities. Expressing his deep disappointment with Rigel, Semiradov shoots and kills him. Back with Tatiana and Konstantin, the two hide behind some crates as the soldiers slowly close in. Tatiana throws the syringe containing a hormone cocktail that can mimic the effects of Addison's disease at Konstantin, forcing the creature to leave his body immediately. The creature suddenly appears in front of the soldiers, attacking them one by one. Tatiana quickly drags Konstantin into Rigel's car and drives it straight for the exit gates. Semiradov arrives a little too late, discovering that Tatiana and Konstantin have already escaped. He decides to face the creature on his own. At dawn, Tatiana stops the car to check on Konstantin's condition, which is looking critical. Right behind them, Semiradov and his team are closing in. Feeling helpless and out of options, Tatiana approaches them and admits she was wrong to think that Konstantin could survive without the creature. Semiradov takes the badly injured creature with the intention of forcing it back inside Konstantin. As Konstantin becomes fully symbiotic with the creature, he transfers his consciousness into it, killing Semiradov and his entire team. Now free from all danger, the creature re-enters Konstantin's body, and within just a few seconds, he regains his full vitality. Looking into the distance, they see the authorities finally arriving. Now able to breathe a sigh of relief, Konstantin tells Tatiana that he's finally made made his decision, and he pulls the trigger to kill the creature inside himself. Tatiana survives and goes on to live a free life. After some time, once everything is settled, she's ready to start a brand new chapter in her life, now together with her adopted son, the child of the late Commander Konstantin Veshnyakov. What if you found out something from outer space was living inside you? What would you do?